the earth is but one country. Everywhere you go these days, people seem to be asking, what is the world coming to? We believe it's coming to unity.
This is an unofficial report commissioned by the Secretary-General of the United Nations Conference on the Human Environment. This report is prepared with the assistance of the Consultants Committee with 152 members from 58 countries, published in 1972.
This is the essence of all the results of the investigations and consultations of 152 learned representatives from 58 countries. Printed on the back of the book, Only One Earth, it says, "It is only in our own day that astronomers, physicists, geologists, biologists, chemists, anthropologists, ethnologists, and archaeologists have all combined in a single witness of advanced science to tell us that in every alphabet of our being we do indeed belong to a single system, powered by a single energy, manifesting a fundamental unity under all its variations, and depending for its survival on the balance and health of the total system."
If this vision of unity, which is not a vision only, but a hard and inescapable scientific fact, can become part of the common insight of all the inhabitants of planet Earth, then we may find that beyond all our inevitable pluralisms, we can achieve just enough unity of purpose to build a human world.
Over 100 years prior to this report, Baha'u'llah prepared man for this change in the human heart when he proclaimed the oneness of mankind and made it a cardinal principle of the Baha'i faith.
Ever since the middle of the last century, when Baha'u'llah, founder of the Baha'i faith, proclaimed, "This handful of dust, the earth, is one home, let it be in unity," and "The earth is but one country, and mankind its citizens," the Baha'is have been working toward that glorious goal. The United Nations, therefore, represents a significant step in the fulfillment of their aspirations and labors. Would you be surprised if you learnt that the Baha'is believe that the words in the book of Isaiah, which is now a part of the United Nations Plaza, is a prophecy about Baha'u'llah's revelation and its goal, world peace and the unity of mankind? The full verse of Isaiah reads, "And he shall judge among the nations, and shall rebuke many people, and they shall beat their swords into plowshares, and their spears into pruning hooks. Nation shall not lift up sword against nation, neither shall they learn war any more."
Abdu'l-Baha, the son and appointed successor of Baha'u'llah, in his tablet addressed to the International Court of Justice, The Hague, writes,
"There is not one soul whose conscience does not testify that in this day there is no more important matter in the world than that of universal peace and unity of mankind."
These words, written more than half a century ago, have never been more meaningful than now. According to the latest statistics of the United Nations, there have been 120 wars since the Second World War. 20 to 25 million people have been killed in war since that time.
$600 billion spent per year globally on arms. Most weapons are 50,000 times larger than the Hiroshima bomb. There is 6,000 times more explosive power in the world than there was in total in the Second World War. estimated to be 800 million people in the world who are living in destitute conditions.
But I think before any great change, you undergo some form of suffering. And I think the degree of suffering and the amount of pain that the world is going through really either bodes for, something absolutely miraculous to happen, either a start of a new era, or, we will just move to total destruction, really.
We're not going to move towards total destruction. It's going to be that new era that we've got before us. And we've got that, splendid vision of what's going to come out in the end.
Do you know what the word is used in the Baha'i writings to describe this thing at the end? It's birth. But we're going through travail at the moment. This is this old-fashioned word, isn't it? We're going through travail. And I've come across something in the Baha'i writings which, when I read it, it shocked me, but also gave me hope. Do you mind if I say it? Will that be all right? Yeah? Baha'u'llah says that the world is in travail, and its agitation waxeth day by day. Its face is turned towards waywardness and unbelief. Its perversity will long continue. And then he goes on to say that there shall suddenly appear that which shall cause the limbs of mankind to quake. A terror situation, perhaps. And then he says, this is the hope coming in now. He says, then will a divine standard be unfurled, and the nightingale of paradise warble its melody. So we're giving birth, travail, it's giving birth to something new and hopeful.
The discussion continues with Mr. Vivian Bartlett, teacher in design, craft and technology in Newport, Wales. Ms. Shirin Fosda, biochemical research student at the University of Liverpool. Mr. Martin Cortazzi, lecturer in education at the University of Leicester. Dr. Wendy Moman, a JP and Doctor of Political Science. Mrs. Hazel Fleming, manager of a youth training scheme in Somerset, and Mr. Joseph Foster, retired head of Department of Technology at Kendall College of Further Education.
Well, so far at least, humanity and its leaders and its statesmen haven't been able to explain or control any of the problems that we've mentioned. There have been a lot of attempts to try and solve these problems. There have been a lot of very laudable efforts at mutual tolerance, principles of international cooperation, political, economic unification, and so on. But it's not hard to see that although these are very worthy attempts, they haven't yet provided any of the answers, nor are they likely to.
I came across an analogy years ago, if I may explain it. I'm sure it clears up in my mind anyhow, this sort of transitional stage that we're going through in the consciousness of people's minds. A lady had a dream, and the dream was about one of the central figures of our faith, Abdu'l-Baha, and a swamp. And in this swamp, the mass of mankind was steadily slipping, because the sides of the swamp were very, very slippery. And around the edge of the swamp, many well-meaning people were throwing in ropes and trying to drag the people out, because, of course, logically, this is what to do. If you see somebody drowning, you throw them a lifeline, don't you? Anyhow, they were throwing these ropes in, and the people were being dragged out one by one, perhaps 2 at a time, 10 at a time. And then because of the slipperiness of the swamp itself, they fell back in, and even some of the helpers fell back in. And this situation was going on, and the swamp waters were rising, and more people were being engulfed. Anyhow, a well-wisher of mankind went up to Abdu'l-Baha, who was sitting on a little hill nearby, and said, Abdu'l-Baha, we know you as a kind and loving man who is interested in unity and harmony. Why aren't you doing something to help here? And the reply was, Abdu'l-Baha is helping. He's definitely helping. He's building a machine to drain the swamp. And I think this is the situation we have today. We want to get at the root of the cause and not the branches.
To achieve this, Baha'u'llah proclaimed to the entire human race,
Ye are the fruits of one tree, and the leaves of one branch. Let not man glory in this, that he loveth his country. Let him rather glory in this, that he loveth his kind. The earth is but one country, and mankind its citizens.
Every dispensation, you know, it has its own particular emphasis. Every age, every epoch has its own emphasis. Each has its own special features. Now in this dispensation, this age we're living in now, the special emphasis for this age is the oneness of mankind. Now this oneness of mankind is bringing together of all the peoples and kindreds of the world to work together in unity and harmony. I think these are the thoughts that we should try to evolve and think about now, the oneness of mankind.
I think it's what Viv says has happened. You know, the world has shrunk and become so small so that we are now aware of all the different peoples. So we now know that we are one, that there are no differences. We now know the different ways that people live in different parts of the world. The television's brought it to us right in our front room, so we know how the people look in, you know, Tibet or in Ecuador. We know something about their customs and how they get along in life. And so we know that they're regular people just like us, and we are all one.
Yes, I think that's true. When you look at the evolution of, say, transportation, very few people now haven't been somewhere else. I mean, in the old days, if you went 20 miles from where you were born, you were considered well-traveled.
As far as you could walk.
Exactly. Whereas now, you know, people take holidays abroad, they go to other places, they have different cuisines, they bring those cuisines back
Oh
to...
yes, you don't even have to travel. The food will come to you.
Well, exactly.
Spaghetti, hamburgers,
Yeah.
goulash, chop suey. I mean, these are
Yeah.
things which
That's
a
right.
generation ago people hadn't heard of, never mind eaten.
Yes, and we're learning to appreciate the differences that people have, the fact that they eat a different food, the fact that they wear different clothes, they speak a different language, learning to adjust to those differences, learning also to adapt some of them to ourselves, like you said, the different foods and so on, gives us a wider appreciation of people. And I also think that it gives us an insight into the fact that people really are the same. They have the same kinds of problems,
Right.
and
That's
sometimes the same solutions
You
too.
know, when I travelled around the world, I was lucky enough to be in the merchant navy, or unlucky as the case may be. And I always thought when I went to school before that we had these maps which had lines separating one country from another, you know, red lines separating this country from that, a yellow one separating that country from this. And I went around and I saw these different countries and I was looking unconsciously for these lines. I didn't find one line separating this country from that country. You know, all the divisions seem to be in our mind. It's in the mentality, perhaps the way we've been brought up. I'm Welsh, he's English, or he's French, he's Australian, and so on. But to be aware of the consciousness of the oneness of mankind, different way of thinking. And it's marvellous to travel, perhaps through the television or...
The world has been absolutely forced towards this recognition. I mean, economically, for instance, the price of oil goes up in one country, the price of bread goes up in the baker's shop next door. You know, there's an oil spillage somewhere way out 1,000 miles in the Atlantic. I can't swim on Brighton Beach.
That's right.
What you're talking about is the basic interdependence of all the peoples of the world, isn't it? It's an established fact.
Well, that's an
We're here,
economic
aren't we?
thing.
Right, right.
But it applies socially, it applies in terms of commerce, trade, business, finance, and also spiritually. I mean, this consciousness of the oneness of mankind is a spiritual awareness of brotherhood, which should be translated into day-to-day living as well.
So we're not talking about uniformity here, isn't it? Let's clear that aspect up. Really, when we're talking about oneness, we're not talking about the sameness of things, isn't it, you know? Because Joe is a Geordie, it doesn't mean to say that I have to be a Geordie, or Shirin comes from Malaysia, that, you know, we all have to be Malay, as the case may be. But we're all different. We've all got our different ways of looking at things according to our different cultural backgrounds and so on. And, you know, whenever anybody says unity to me, I think of differences, fantastic differences, not uniformity, not going around in the same uniform.
Yeah, we see this as being very difficult at this point in time, but in the past, when we got nations coming about, I mean, the prospect of tribes, warring tribes coming together must have been equally difficult to those people, and you know, the sort of closeness that they had couldn't have been anything compared to what we've got today. And the coming together of the states of America, North America, to form the United States, really must have been, you know, much more difficult than what we've got to contend with in order to bring the nations of the world together, because, you know, science and technology have already brought us so close together, and travel and intermingling of people have brought about this consciousness of the oneness of mankind, something that perhaps the people in the United States didn't have when they were told it, or when they started to bring about this federation of states.
What we're talking about then is really coming together, coming to grips with institutions, with people, everybody amalgamating for the benefit of the whole of mankind, aren't we? That the part is contributing towards the whole. And if we can have this, a fantastic world commonwealth, where there is a commonwealth, the fellow over there has perhaps not the same wealth as me, but it's common to everybody, that he can have his bread and jam for breakfast or whatever it may be. He can be assured of it, and perhaps eventually we can have the best that science can offer for the least of us. Wouldn't that be fantastic?
The words of Baha'u'llah here hit me. Let your thoughts be world-embracing rather than confined to your own selves. And this puts it in essence, you see?
There are a lot of organisations, I think, in the world today which are anti a lot of what is going on in the world. They're trying to pull down the existing world order, but they don't seem to have an answer or an idea of what they're going to put up instead. And I think that the teachings of Baha'u'llah and the answer he's given us as to how this oneness of mankind is going to be established and maintained, the idea of the world commonwealth, is something which is very important.
I think the key to it are these words of Baha'u'llah, and he's talking to the whole of mankind here, addressing mankind. He says, the tabernacle of unity has been raised. That's a lovely word, isn't it? A tabernacle of unity. That a tent, or and of course it has such a holy meaning for people of a Jewish or Christian background. The tabernacle of unity has been raised. Regard ye not one another as strangers. Of one tree are ye all the fruit, and of one bough the leaves.
Now, in the same way as we've had to relinquish part of our own national sovereignty for the betterment of the world, we as individuals personally have to also relinquish part of ourselves. Now, the bit that we've got to relinquish of ourselves is prejudice. Now, this is difficult. To relinquish the prejudice about colour, race, creed, all of these things, this is what I'm talking about. That we have to give up this prejudice that we have in ourselves towards our fellow beings, so that we become truly united as individuals.
Yes, I think what you've been talking about here, Joe, is change, isn't it? It's change in the human heart, in the individual, and change in the society for nations, in their perspective, change in perspective. And I always think a lot of people are afraid of change. They're afraid to change the world, to change themselves. They're afraid of what might happen. But if you think about nature, in nature things change all the time. And you can see that it's the same for people. I mean, we're subject to those same laws of change and those laws of nature.
One sort of change we don't have to make is maybe related towards unity. Because some people think that to achieve unity everybody's got to be the same. Of course that means most of us are going to have to change, if that's going to happen. But of course it needn't. We don't have to, in fact, all be the same, look the same, dress the same, think the same, and so on. That would be uniformity, and that's not the Baha'i idea at all, is it? The Baha'i idea, much more, is unity in diversity. First unity, but preserve as much diversity as possible. Maybe one way to think about this is to think of an orchestra or band. I mean, you've got lots of different instruments. You've got guitars, you've got tenor saxes, you've got percussion and other instruments. And in fact, of course, all the instruments are completely different, aren't they? And you play them in different ways. Some of them you hit, some of them you blow through, some of them you bang, and so on. And you play them with different tunes as well. You wouldn't expect all the instruments, in fact, to play the same thing, would you?
No.
But they can all play in coordination. They can all play a melody or dance or a tune or whatever it is. So it's this unity in diversity that we're about, not uniformity.
I think I have to just say, though, that the only thing that's missing from your analogy is that unless there's a conductor and music, those different instruments are all making just sounds. They're not making music. If you've got a band made up of a guitar and a drum and a trumpet, and they all just play what they like at any old interval, you haven't got music. You haven't got a tune. What you've got is just a lot of noise on the stage. You need a conductor, somebody who's the leader of the band, to say, right, guitar, cue in, or whatever it is. Play your piece. And you also need the music that they can follow. to know that they're all playing the same tune, otherwise you've just got a jumble of sounds.
Well, what you've got then is by looking into having a conductor is coming back to a teacher from God, isn't it, really? This is where Baha'u'llah comes back in on the scene, so to speak, and gives us very firmly the guidance whereby we can jolly well overcome all these disharmonious situations on the planet.
Baha'i teachings for world unity emerged clearly from the writings of Baha'u'llah, which are collected in volumes of books, in a set of principles. Whilst I'm reading some of these, see if you agree with them. The oneness of mankind, the oneness of religion, the unity of science and religion, the relinquishing of prejudices, equalization of means of existence, universal parliament, universal language, universal education, equal status for men and women, the unfettered search after truth.
Here are several of Baha'u'llah's major works, and a number of basic Baha'i books which will assist the reader wishing to secure a broader knowledge of Baha'i history and teaching. Some of them can be found in public or college libraries, and most of them can be ordered through Baha'i publishing trusts in different countries. Gleanings from the writings of Baha'u'llah is a representative selection. The Hidden Words and the Seven Valleys and the Four Valleys deal with man's spiritual life and the states of the soul. The Book of Certitude is indispensable for understanding Baha'i views of God, progressive revelation, and the nature of religion. The Proclamation of Baha'u'llah, a compilation of his own announcements to the kings and ecclesiastical leaders of the world, and to mankind in general, was published in 1967 to mark the centenary of the inception of that proclamation. Prayers and Meditations.
I thought of that wonderful statement of Baha'u'llah's where he mentions about the coming of age of the human race. And isn't this an aspect of maturity, that we take control of our own destiny? When we're children, we are controlled by our parents and circumstances around us. When we grow up, we start dictating in which way our future is going to go. And surely Baha'u'llah is proclaimed this coming of age of the human race.
That's interesting what you were saying there, Viv, about the maturity of mankind and the oneness of mankind, because in a way, the realization of the oneness of mankind will be the maturity of mankind. And not to realize that means that we, members of the human race, are going to stick at adolescence, which would be a pity. It would be a block. And in a way, when Baha'u'llah is talking about this realization of the oneness of mankind, he's giving us a promise and a warning. He's giving us a warning because not to bring this about is going to be to miss an opportunity for the salvation of the planet, and a promise that its realization is close at hand. And really, when we think about this, we've got to ask ourselves, well, who is Baha'u'llah? And what is the sort of transforming power which he and his teachings have, which have certainly changed us, and of course millions of others around the world.
The revelation proclaimed by Baha'u'llah, his followers believe, is divine in origin, all-embracing in scope, broad in its outlook, scientific in its method, humanitarian in its principles, and dynamic in the influence it exerts on the hearts and minds of men.
Baha'u'llah claims to be and is regarded by Baha'is as a messenger of God, just as Abraham, Moses, Zoroaster, Krishna, the Buddha, Christ, and Muhammad. Like them, he has renewed the spirit of religion, adapting it to the requirements of society in this day.
His words, addressed in 1868 to Queen Victoria, carry for all peace-loving peoples a direct significance. He writes,
"That which the Lord hath ordained as the sovereign remedy and the mightiest instrument for the healing of all the world is the union of all its peoples in one universal cause, one common faith. We desire but the good of the world and the happiness of the nations. That all nations shall become one in faith, and all men as brothers. That the bonds of affection and unity between the sons of men shall be strengthened. That diversity of religion shall cease, and differences of race be annulled. So it shall be. These fruitless strifes, these ruinous wars shall pass away, and the most great peace shall come." Don't let the sun close my eyes, O Lord. Don't let the sun close my eyes. Show me the way through the dark, O Lord. Show me the way to paradise. Flowers growing on a barren land, water where once there was sand, shrine of gold on a mountainside, gardens of paradise. At the feast of Noah we'll not forget the release of one with no regrets, for all the years in fetters and chains, to renew the light again. Doves flying on clouds of glory, ships sailing on promise